Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and today I wanted to do our first look and some first impressions on the Crusader Industries A1 Spirit. If you don't have one or haven't had access to see one yet, I wanted to make sure you had a chance to see it up close. The ship design is really strong. We knew that from the concept imagery. The whole Spirit lineup was destined to be attractive. It has some kind of flat angles on the ship that give it an aggressive look. It's not as tall as I was expecting visually, so it's got kind of that front cross-section that's a little bit more narrow, which may give it a little bit more stealth on approach. The black paint is attractive. You have some very Crusader-like engines on the back, and the tail, or kind of the spoiler, is very reminiscent of the Hercules ship, giving you a consistency between models within the line. Now, as you get out of the pilot seat in the Spirit, you'll notice that you're actually sitting elevated in the cockpit, so you get retracted back into the crew habitation area, which seems to make use of the space while giving it a more narrow nose on the ship. There is a remote turret on the Spirit. You can access that through your co-pilot seat. You go up, you basically will access remote turret. Mine has been wonky both in the game being live as well as in Arena Commander, which you're seeing right now. You can tell I obviously was having a hard time finding the correct way to get into the turret. What made this interesting when you get into the turret, though, is that I keep getting this repositioning turret error. The turret is functional, but when you look around to the outside of the ship, you can see that the turret is on rails, which makes me think this is eventually going to operate kind of like the Scorpius turret, allowing you to change position of the directionality that you're firing. But nothing moves right now, and I'm not able to actually confirm the location that I'm at. So we're going to leave it as weird, but you can kind of see the direction that they're going with it. The interior design, very Crusaders. It feels like all the other ships in the line, which is great from that design consistency. You've got two bunks within the habitation area, which is admittedly a little bit small, but you do still get a little bit of a kitchenette with some cabinetry that works. So you have the ability to store food items, and eventually, hopefully, some of these coffee makers and things will work. You also have a weapons rack, easily accessible for people on the bridge. As well as two suits there for EVA if you need to get off the ship or you don't want to necessarily store armor. Also in the midsection of the ship, you've got some component access. Most of these are components that we don't really have in the game yet, like radar and avionics and things like that. The panel's still open. There's still some nice visualization there. But, I mean, even when you see things that we have, like shield generators, it doesn't really matter because you can't really yank them out yet to really do repairs. Although there is some implications there for how we're actually doing things like salvage now that that's actually in the game with some physicalized items. The back of the ship being the bomb bay, you will see here that you've got the 10 bombs that are available on the A1 Spirit. It's cool seeing them all lined up, especially with the visual, just being able to understand how they would just naturally fall and drop to the ground. And in the very back, you end up having more component access, a little bit of a cargo area. And basically, the amount of space that you have back here for something like a vehicle is a little bit limited. It's not really meant to be a vehicle hauler, though. But really, what's interesting, though, is if you leave that airlock open between this little component/storage area and the bomb area, you can actually see how you could haul a pretty good number of vehicles along with you, really being width kind of the limiting factor in what you're able to bring along. Especially seeing as the ramp that's on the back of the ship is a pretty good size to be able to really fit whatever vehicles you needed to get on there as is. So now that the ship is in the game, I think a lot of the design, we kind of understood what we were going to be getting, though it's nice to see it brought to life. Some of the things that we didn't really know about until the ship came into the game would be like flight model and durability and all that kind of stuff. So looking at Urkel and seeing some of the numbers there, we have a flight model where you have a speed of 154 meters per second SCM and 1120 at top speed. Ultimately, what that means is the ship's not particularly fast. It's not particularly slow. There's just nothing ultimately all that impressive about it. I was hoping to see that it was going to be a little bit quicker, kind of in line with the MSR. Granted, it's not supposed to be a blockade runner or an info runner, so I didn't expect it to have that same level of speed. But it was a little bit lower than I was hoping for. The acceleration and its responsiveness, though, when you're applying boost, is pretty darn impressive. You get that familiar and comfortable Crusader growl that almost sounds a little bit animalistic, and I like that implementation. Where I don't love it is the overall agility in your three primary vectors or directionalities, your pitch, your yaw, and your roll. The pitch is at 28 degrees per second, the yaw is at 28, the roll is at 117. And the way that all plays out is 117 degrees per second ultimately means that if you just want to complete a full roll, it's going to take you about 3 seconds to do that. And that's pretty miserable for a ship. Again, overall, it feels kind of balanced and okay, but the numbers aren't great, and how that ends up in practicality, you kind of have to consider your roll, right? Like, if I'm intended to have a ship that's purpose is to drop bombs on the ground, I don't need a whole lot of, dogfighting ability. It doesn't need to be fast in any direction. I should ultimately be planning where I want to be and dropping bombs and setting up my vector accordingly. That being said, it doesn't mean you're not going to get into a tough spot, and if you need to adjust to something dynamically, I don't like the way this is set up. The durability on the ship, though, did provide some comfort. The total HP is 46,300, which is more than a Harbinger at 42,900. The body is 16,500 HP, the nose is 13,500, which are both pretty respectable numbers. The shields, though, one size 2 compared to having 2 size 2s on the Harbinger. I'm just picking the Harbinger because it's a familiar and comfortable ship. Weaponry on board the ship, you have 4 pilot-controlled size 3 M5A laser cannons. Those are all pretty good. On a ship like this, I don't think something like spam ability is going to help you a lot. I think you really want the most damage that you can get when you have something really important in front of you. So I think the laser cannons are pretty good, even if you didn't decide to upgrade to something like a ballistic cannon. You also have 2 size 2 M4As on the remote turret. Missile-wise, you have 4 total size 3s, so good damage output, but there's not a lot of them. In the bombs, you have 10 size 5 Stormburst. Those allegedly have a radius of explosion at 100 meters. The size 10 A2 bomb, for comparison, is allegedly 250 meter radius. Those are Urkel numbers. In practicality, on the ground, it seems like the blast radius is significantly larger than that. So I don't know if that 100 meters is for the maximum damage. You have kind of that margin of error. Or if that's the ultimate blast radius, which again, if that's the case, doesn't feel quite right. Overall, the flight performance of the A1, it's not great, but it does at least feel balanced and controlled. The ship is durable enough to survive a few bombing runs, which it needed in order to be able to continue to do bombing runs over and over to saturate an area. Though if the intended purpose was to bomb, run, come back, I would almost prefer less armor and more shields that could regenerate while you're reorienting for your next bombing run. That might also cut some weight to make it faster. The speed itself isn't real problematic, but it does leave a little bit something to be desired, especially with more dangerous ground-to-air platforms in the area. The bombing is interesting because in its current state, when you go to a bombing mode, you get the icon for dropping, but then it flickers away and you kind of go in blind. Which means that the version that we're playing with now, it's not really working all that well. Now, when that indicator is working, though, it's going to change how this gets reviewed. I will say that having the ability to increase the number of bombs you can drop in the same way you can increase the number of missiles feels pretty viable with 10 bombs versus the 3 that you have in the A2. So you have more staying ability to lock down an area by maybe dropping 3 bombs and then coming back and dropping 3 bombs and then dropping 2 bombs and 2 bombs or something like that. Overall, it's frankly hard to judge the ship until all the mechanics to support it are in and working, but overall, the ship is really well designed, it serves an interesting purpose eventually, and provides a nice step between something like the massive Moab-toting A2 and the eventual carpet bombing or cluster bombing that might make its appearance in later modules for the Retaliator and maybe some other ships. So if you have one, check it out. It's a fun ship, though admittedly limited in purpose. Otherwise, I think that's it, so stay tuned for more content coming soon. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and take care.